Paint a vivid snapshot. A broke student trying to make ends meet, walking into what seemed like a promising bar manager job. But behind the shiny restaurant doors was a woman banned from her own business, running everything from the shadows. One bad decision led to lies, underage drinking, and a $50,000 takedown. All sparked by one falsely accused theft. The ending? Savage. So, rewind about 6 years ago. I was in my early 20s, living in Ontario, and flat out broke. I was a struggling student at the time, juggling part-time gigs, mounting debt, and that constant looming pressure of making ends meet. You know, the kind of broke where even boxed mac and cheese feels like a luxury? Yeah, that level. I was scouring job boards, local Facebook groups, walking into restaurants with my resume, just hoping someone would take a chance on me. When I stumbled on a listing for a bar manager position at a new restaurant opening up not far from where I lived. The place had some buzz around it. It was set near a marina, had a slick-looking patio, and the concept seemed promising. I thought, hey, I've got experience, I'm SmartServe certified. This could be it. The interview process was pretty casual, honestly, almost too casual. The woman I met with, who introduced herself as the owner, seemed more interested in getting the place open quickly than asking deep questions. She explained right away that due to some legal stuff, she was super vague, she wasn't technically allowed to be involved in the business. Apparently, her liquor license had been revoked at a previous spot, and there was now some stipulation that she couldn't own, run, or even be on the premises of a new establishment. Something about being labeled a prohibited person. Her husband, she said, was listed as the official owner on paper. But let's be real, she was the one calling the shots. The only way they could get a new liquor license, she told me, was by hiring someone like me, someone with 5 years experience and a valid SmartServe certificate, to officially manage the bar. That way, it looked good on paper. I was to be the responsible party. Now, that should have set off a ton of alarm bells. A blacklisted bar owner trying to run a business from the shadows. Huge legal risks, but I was desperate, and the pay was solid. Plus, a manager title looked good on my resume. I convinced myself I could manage the chaos. I needed the job. I could stomach the weirdness. But from the very start, there were red flags waving right in my face. For one, she didn't even try to hide her involvement. She was at the bar constantly micromanaging kitchen staff, giving orders to the servers, acting like the queen of the castle. There were weird shifts in scheduling, odd cash handling habits, and whispered gossip among the staff about how this wasn't her first rodeo with liquor board violations. Still, I stayed because rent, because groceries, because student loans. I told myself, keep your head down, do the work, and don't get involved in the drama. But as you'll see, that drama had a way of dragging people in whether they wanted it or not. At first, things seemed hopeful, even exciting. The bar had a decent launch. A lot of locals came to check it out. There was a buzz in the air. People loved the idea of a marina-side restaurant. The drinks were flowing, the patio was packed, and there was a general sense of optimism. For a hot second, I actually thought, hey, maybe this'll work out. But that bubble popped fast. Within the first 2 weeks, the owner, remember, the one who legally wasn't allowed to be there, was practically living at the bar. She wasn't just on-site quietly observing. No, she was in the thick of it, barking orders at the servers, redesigning the menu on a whim, stepping into the kitchen and messing with prep. She had zero chill and even less business sense. Her idea of management was pure chaos. One day, she'd decide fries were too expensive and slash them from every dish. The next, she'd walk in with frozen seafood from some sketchy store and demand it be added as a special. And she didn't just ignore the legal stipulations. She laughed in their face. She'd drink on the job, schmooze with customers, and tell staff what to do like she owned the place. Which, she kind of did, just not legally. Her husband, the so-called paper owner, was barely present. He'd show up occasionally, say a few words, pour himself a drink, and vanish again. It was obvious who was running the show. Meanwhile, I was stuck in the middle. On paper, I was the one in charge. I was supposed to be managing the front of house, ensuring compliance, keeping everything legal. But how could I do any of that when the actual boss was ignoring every rule in the book? It didn't take long for the staff to feel the pressure. Our original kitchen manager quit in week 3 after a massive blowout with the owner. Apparently, she threw a frozen chicken breast at him because he wasn't seasoning it right. One of the waitresses followed shortly after, citing mental health reasons, which we all knew meant she just couldn't take the stress and unpredictability. As people quit, the owner refused to replace them. She thought she was saving money by trimming the staff. In reality, she was digging her own grave. She started cooking herself, and she was terrible. Orders took forever, food came out cold or raw, and customers started complaining constantly. We had one table literally walk out mid-meal after waiting 90 minutes for a plate of wings. Then came the reviews, scathing ones. People in town talk, especially in small communities, and the gossip was brutal. Owner's a drunk, food's trash, they let kids drink there. The stories spread like wildfire. In less than a month, we went from packed patio nights to maybe 3 or 4 regulars showing up just to drink. Morale among the remaining staff hit rock bottom. Those of us who stayed were constantly walking on eggshells. If the owner was in a bad mood, she'd scream in front of customers. If she was in a good mood, she'd get drunk and try to convince us to work extra hours for free. One girl cried in the storage room after being told she was too ugly to serve tables. It was that toxic. I tried to stay professional, I really did. I cleaned up messes, handled customers, stepped in where I could. But it was like trying to put out a house fire with a glass of water. Every time I thought maybe we'd catch a break, she'd do something even more outrageous, like canceling food deliveries to cut costs, or accusing staff of stealing just because the till was light by $1. The vibe changed completely. What started as a hopeful new gig turned into a war zone of mismanagement and manipulation. We were all burned out, demoralized, and just waiting for the next explosion. And as the legal manager with my name tied to the liquor license, I started to feel the weight of it all. Every time she served someone who was clearly intoxicated or let an underage guest slip through, I could technically be held responsible. It was terrifying. But again, I needed the money. I kept telling myself, just hang on, just a little longer. But deep down I knew this was a ticking time bomb. And it was only a matter of time before everything blew up. It was one of those rare perfect summer evenings in Ontario, warm, breezy, and buzzing with activity. The sun had just dipped low enough to throw golden streaks across the lake, and the small marina next to the bar was packed. Boats of all sizes were docking, their passengers eager to stretch their legs and grab a drink or a bite to eat. For once, the bar was alive again. We hadn't had a night like this in weeks. I was cautiously optimistic. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point. The patio filled quickly. I was hustling between tables, trying to keep the servers organized and the vibe positive. It almost felt like how things should have been from the beginning. That is, until the group showed up. They stumbled in off the pier, maybe 8 or 9 of them, loud, rowdy, and already clearly lit. You didn't need a breathalyzer to tell they were drunk. Slurred words, stumbling, shouting over each other. One guy knocked over a patio chair just trying to walk in. They looked barely old enough to vote, let alone drink. Instantly, every alarm bell in my head started ringing. I greeted them at the door and asked for IDs. A couple of them rolled their eyes, another tried to joke his way past me. Come on, it's just beer. One girl giggled, clearly hammered. Their IDs were fake, poorly done, easily spotted. I calmly but firmly told them I wouldn't be serving them. I said they were welcome to stay and grab food or water, but I wouldn't risk my license by serving alcohol to a visibly intoxicated and likely underage group. That's when the whining turned aggressive. One of the guys got in my face, swearing up a storm, saying I was ruining their night. A few of the others started chiming in, accusing me of being power trippy and just a waitress on a power trip. The entitlement was unreal. But I stood my ground. I knew the law, and more importantly, I knew that I was the one liable if anything went sideways. But apparently I was the only one who cared. Just as I was trying to de-escalate, the owner's husband waltzed in from the bar, probably drawn by the noise. He looked at the group, gave me a dismissive glance, and said, "Don't worry, folks. We'll take care of you." Before I could even respond, he was behind the bar, pouring drinks. Shots, beers, whatever they asked for. The group cheered like they'd just won a round of free lottery tickets. I stood there in disbelief, watching this grown man, someone who knew the situation, knew the rules, and definitely knew my role, just hand out alcohol like it was nothing. I felt sick. I tried one last time. I approached him and said, "You know this is illegal, right? They're underage, they're already drunk."
He shrugged. "We need the business." That was it.
That was the line that snapped something in me. We need the business. As if that justified everything. As if risking my name, my job, my future was worth a couple $100 from some teenagers on a party boat. From that moment on, I knew two things. I was going to be fired, and I was going to take them down with me. I went back to the pause and clocked out early. I couldn't be part of that mess anymore. I sat in the back office for a minute, just trying to breathe, trying to push back the heat rising in my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was pure helplessness. I had done everything right. I followed the rules. I stood up for what was legal and ethical. And I was being undermined by people who didn't give a single damn about consequences. After that group finally left, louder, drunker, and somehow even more obnoxious, I knew the end was coming. The owner had been looking for a reason to push me out, and now from her twisted perspective I was costing them money. In her world, doing the right thing was bad for business. The rest of the night crawled by, the energy was tense. Staff were quiet, glancing at each other nervously. Everyone had seen what went down, and no one said a word. I went home that night numb, not even angry anymore, just drained. Like I was watching a slow-motion car crash, and I was sitting in the front seat. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It gives you clarity. I knew then that if they tried to blame me for anything, if they came at me with accusations or tried to fire me, I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to blow the whole thing up. The very next day, I walked into work with a knot in my stomach. I had this sinking feeling, like I was walking straight into a setup. And sure enough, before I could even clock in, the owner was waiting for me by the office door. Her face was smug, like a cat who'd just cornered a mouse. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked, all fake sweet, like she wasn't already rehearsing the hit job in her head. I followed her into the office where her husband was already seated, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. That alone told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just going to reprimand me, they were going to get rid of me. "We're missing $50 from the till," she said, straight-faced. "And we looked at the reports. You were the last one to use it." I blinked. For a second, I thought she might be joking, but no. She was dead serious. Trying to pin a missing $50 on me. Out of all the chaotic things happening at that bar, she landed on that. "You think I stole $50? I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "There's a camera right above the till. It's synced with the POS system. Check the footage." Her expression didn't change. That told me everything. She wasn't accusing me because she thought I did it. She was accusing me because it was convenient. She needed an excuse. She didn't want a manager who stood up for the law. She wanted someone who'd shut up and serve drunk teenagers. And since I didn't fit that mold, I was expendable. "We don't need to check the camera," she replied coldly. "We've made our decision." I stared at her, waiting. Surely there was more. Maybe some explanation, some justification, even a fake apology, but no, just silence. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice cracking a little from disbelief. "You're firing me over this." Her husband finally spoke. "You're no longer a good fit. We need someone we can trust." That was rich. Someone they could trust. Translation: someone who wouldn't blow the whistle when they served minors or broke liquor laws on a nightly basis. I didn't beg, I didn't cry. I just stood up, nodded once, and walked out. My hands were shaking. Not because I was scared, but because I was furious. Furious at being lied about. Furious at being discarded like trash after doing everything right. Furious that the people breaking every rule in the book could just shrug, lie, and move on. As I stepped outside, the warm summer air felt heavy. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. I wasn't even thinking about the $50. I was thinking about the big picture. My name was tied to that liquor license, my certification, my reputation. And these people were treating it like a joke. If something serious had gone wrong, If someone had gotten hurt or worse, I would have been the one in legal trouble. I sat in my car for a while, staring at the wheel. It wasn't just the humiliation of being fired, it was the betrayal. I'd stayed in that mess of a place longer than I should have. I defended them, picked up the slack, kept things running when no one else would. And how did they repay me? By framing me for a petty theft and tossing me aside like garbage. I kept replaying the night before in my head, the underage kids. The husband pouring them shots while I stood there like some powerless placeholder. The way the owner looked at me with thinly veiled contempt, it all clicked. They didn't want a manager. They wanted a puppet. And when I refused to play along, they decided to cut their losses. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just an employee. I was the very reason they had that liquor license in the first place. And now I had nothing left to lose. I went home in a haze of rage. My hands gripped the steering wheel the whole way, like it was the only thing keeping me from snapping. But the minute I stepped through my door, something inside me shifted. The helplessness I'd felt in the office turned into cold, sharp clarity. They wanted me gone because I was a threat, not to their money, but to their lies. They thought they could fire me and carry on like nothing happened. But they forgot one crucial detail. The only reason they had that liquor license in the first place was me. The stipulation had been clear from the beginning. Because the owner had her license revoked at a previous establishment, she wasn't allowed to own or operate a licensed venue. To get around that, they needed someone with experience and a Smart Serve certificate, a legal manager who would serve as the face of the bar and be held responsible for its operations. That person was me. And now, with me out of the picture, they were officially in violation. That wasn't just a technicality. It was a bomb waiting to explode. I pulled out my laptop and opened the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario's website. I found the section to report violations, filled out the form, and laid everything out: the illegal management, the underage and intoxicated patrons, the fake ownership structure, and my own wrongful termination after refusing to break the law. I didn't hold back. I even attached a copy of my employment agreement and the job posting for the manager role. I wanted them to see the full picture and understand just how bad things really were. The next morning I got a call. It was a liquor inspector from the ATCO. He asked to meet in person to go over my statement. We arranged to meet at a nearby coffee shop, and I came prepared: notes, text messages, everything I could remember that supported my claims. When he arrived, he looked serious but not unfriendly. We sat down, and I walked him through the entire ordeal. I told him about the owner being on site every day, micromanaging the bar and kitchen. I explained how her husband was a figurehead, doing little more than pouring drinks when convenient. I detailed the night with the underage boaters, how I refused to serve them, how her husband overrode me, how I was fired the very next day for a lie they made up. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The truth was bad enough.
He took notes, asked clarifying questions, and nodded along.
I could tell he'd heard horror stories before, but even he seemed surprised at how blatant they had been. Before we parted ways, he thanked me for coming forward and assured me a surprise inspection would be taking place soon. As I left the coffee shop, the adrenaline hit me. I was nervous, yes. What if they found out I was the one who reported them? What if the threat started? But those fears couldn't outweigh the deep satisfaction I felt. For once I had the power. They had pushed me too far, and now they were about to see the consequences of crossing the wrong person. I wasn't doing this out of spite alone. It was about justice, about accountability, about standing up for every overworked, underpaid employee who ever got screwed over by someone who thought they were untouchable. They thought they could cheat the system, use me, lie to the authorities, serve minors, endanger people, and walk away richer for it. Not on my watch. The surprise inspection happened less than a week later. I didn't get a heads up, but I didn't need one. I'd been on edge, checking the local Facebook chatter and watching the bar's socials for any signs of activity. Then, one afternoon, I saw a post in a local group. Anyone else see the liquor inspector at bar name today? Looked serious. My heart skipped. I started getting texts from former coworkers. Dude, the bar is in chaos right now. Idisko is here. Everyone's freaking out. She's screaming at people. I could practically hear the panic through the screen. The inspector hadn't announced himself. He walked in during what must have been another one of their under-the-table busy hours, a patio half full of boaters, some of them clearly drunk already. Just like I said, the owner was on site running food, giving drink orders, and pouring shots behind the bar. Her husband, nowhere to be seen. It was the perfect storm. The inspector made himself known, badge and all, and started asking questions. He looked at IDs.
He watched as minors scrambled to hide drinks.
He asked who was in charge, and of course no one knew what to say. She tried to claim she was just helping out, but it was too late. He had her dead to rights. Everything I said in my report, every violation, every sketchy operation, was right there in plain sight. That same week, the AGCO handed down the consequences, a fine of over $50,000 and a suspension of their liquor license. And just like that, it was over. The town erupted. Word spread like wildfire. People love drama in small towns, and this was the juiciest scandal in months. Everyone was talking, ex-employees, customers, even rival business owners who had always suspected something shady was going on. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Bar shut down after illegal operations exposed. Fines exceed $50,000 after liquor violations. I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't have to. Everyone already knew who was behind the takedown. And while I wasn't out there bragging, I won't lie, watching their empire crumble was deeply satisfying. The bar closed for good shortly after the fine was issued. No license, no customers, no staff, they were done. Couldn't pay the fine, couldn't salvage the reputation, couldn't keep the lie going any longer. The building sat empty for months after, a silent monument to what happens when greed, ego, and lawbreaking collide. For me, it was vindication. I had walked into that job broke and desperate, thinking I was lucky to be hired. They tried to ruin me, frame me, discredit me, throw me out like garbage. But in the end, they were the ones left with nothing. And every time I drive past that empty building, I smile. Because I know justice was served cold and with a shot of satisfaction. The surprise inspection happened less than a week later. I didn't get a heads up, but I didn't need one. I'd been on edge, checking the local Facebook chatter and watching the bar's socials for any signs of activity. Then, one afternoon, I saw a post in a local group. Anyone else see the liquor inspector at bar name today? Looked serious. My heart skipped. I started getting texts from former coworkers. Dude, the bar is in chaos right now. AGCO is here. Everyone's freaking out. She's screaming at people. I could practically hear the panic through the screen. The inspector hadn't announced himself. He walked in during what must have been another one of their under-the-table busy hours, a patio half full of boaters, some of them clearly drunk already. Just like I said, the owner was on site running food, giving drink orders, and pouring shots behind the bar. Her husband, nowhere to be seen. It was the perfect storm. The inspector made himself known, badge and all, and started asking questions. He looked at IDs.
He watched as minors scrambled to hide drinks.
He asked who was in charge, and of course no one knew what to say. She tried to claim she was just helping out, but it was too late. He had her dead to rights. Everything I said in my report, every violation, every sketchy operation, was right there in plain sight. That same week, the AGCO handed down the consequences, a fine of over $50,000 and a suspension of their liquor license. And just like that, it was over. The town erupted. Word spread like wildfire. People love drama in small towns, and this was the juiciest scandal in months. Everyone was talking, ex-employees, customers, even rival business owners who had always suspected something shady was going on. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Bar shut down after illegal operations exposed. Fines exceed $50,000 after liquor violations. I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't have to. Everyone already knew who was behind the takedown. And while I wasn't out there bragging, I won't lie, watching their empire crumble was deeply satisfying. The bar closed for good shortly after the fine was issued. No license, no customers, no staff, they were done. Couldn't pay the fine, couldn't salvage the reputation, couldn't keep the lie going any longer. The building sat empty for months after, a silent monument to what happens when greed, ego, and lawbreaking collide. For me, it was vindication. I had walked into that job broke and desperate, thinking I was lucky to be hired. They tried to ruin me, frame me, discredit me, throw me out like garbage. But in the end, they were the ones left with nothing. And every time I drive past that empty building, I smile. Because I know justice was served cold and with a shot of satisfaction. Of course, it wasn't all applause and high fives. Not long after the shutdown, I started getting threatening messages from burner accounts, anonymous numbers, and even mutual acquaintances who were clearly still loyal to the owner. Everything from "you'll regret this" to vague warnings about watching my back. Childish stuff, mostly. But still, it rattled me for a bit. But what outweighed the hate were the messages of support. Former staff who had quit or been pushed out reached out to thank me. Locals who'd heard the truth behind the closure said I'd done the right thing. I even had someone buy me a coffee at a local shop just to say, "Good on you for standing up." That part hit deep. I wasn't just proud of getting revenge. I was proud that I'd stood my ground when it counted. That I didn't stay silent just to keep the peace. Watching that bar go down wasn't just personal satisfaction. It was a reminder that no one is above accountability. Desperation makes people reckless. But courage, even when you're scared, even when you're broke, that's what changes things. I didn't just survive that place. I outlasted it. Justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just takes a well-placed email and the courage to speak up. She tried to ruin your reputation, but in the end you cost her everything. Sometimes revenge isn't petty, it's survival. If you enjoyed this story of truth and takedown, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop your best justice served story in the comments.